Hi, I'm Jason Gorber for ThatShelf.com, and we're here to talk about Mobile Fidelity's Rolling Stones box set.
Shelf.
So it's been a weird couple weeks for fans of Mobile Fidelity. I know there's been all kinds of up and downs, swings within the vinyl community, worrying about what's happened to this company. For those not in the know, Mobile Fidelity is actually the current Mobile Fidelity is technically the second generation based on the original Mobile Fidelity back in the 70s and 80s. They really were at the forefront of bringing audiophile vinyl to a very small, very niche collectors community just prior to the absolute dominance of CD, where they were going and using absolute top-notch Japanese pressing, using a specialized version of their vinyl, especially in their higher-end releases, developed in part for CED, actually, I believe. The actual video format, I think there's a direct, if I recall correctly, there's a direct connection between CED playback, which is basically video on vinyl, pre-VHS, and records. Nonetheless, it was JVC technology, and was used for the majority of their sort of higher end releases. Current Mobile Fidelity got bought out. Its current owner, Jim Davis, issued an apology this week about all the craziness with the digital. I'd really do encourage you to, if you're interested, to dive into sort of my walk and talk through the streets of Montreal about why I think this actually might be a good thing for the collecting community. But one thing it will do is, in a funny way, is get people who are super into analog to be really interested in the original, not messing around, pre-digital analog releases that Mobile Fidelity did. Now, people have been complaining about these for other reasons. They've talked about smiley face EQs, about mastering engineers that emphasize bass over treble. In other words, then it wasn't a debate about digital versus analog. It was this mastering engineer versus that mastering engineer. That the mobile MoFi person screwed up what was on the original tapes because they were a bass player, they were bass heavy, or vice versa, that they tweaked it to actually sound sweeter on sort of lesser end equipment. But as people's equipment has improved and technology has improved over the last few decades, things are either better or worse. Some people swear by them, some people dislike them. For me, I find sometimes the actual sound of the record may be hit and miss, but the pressings are often extraordinary. And so even if you get an absolute pristine first pressing of a lot of these records, even from the outset, a lot of times the vinyl itself suffers from a lot of pops, clicks, and just general surface noise, whereas the Mobile Fidelity stuff, because of the care that was brought to their pressing, especially in Japan, is extraordinary. There's a whole conversation to be had about Japanese pressings. I was collecting for a while too, but as many people have pointed out, quite vocally, Mike at the In-Groove, prior to all this little nonsense, that the mastering choices of those in Japan have definitely taken a different tack. Again, different EQ choices. We can get into SHM, SACD, and how, again, I've mentioned it before, my friend calls it raw vegan audio, where you're hearing basically a straight up DSD rip from the master tape. Sounds familiar, but in a way with no sweetening or EQing at all, so that the records themselves sound a little bit flat, because often the master tape is actually mixed to be flat, presupposing that a different mastering stage for production is going to be taken, a mastering for vinyl or mastering for CD, depending on the actual release. In other words, the master tape was like a negative. It was always going to be timed. It was always going to have some additional process that was going to do before you even began to do things with like release. Anyway, long story short, in the midst of all this MoFi craziness, I got an email from a local retailer. Shout out to Rotate This. The owner emailed me and said, "Hey, I got one of these. Do you want it?" And my immediate thought was, "Oh my God, what am we doing?" I am a big enough Rolling Stones fan to care about this. I'm not such a big fan that I've been trying to seek it out, but this one sort of sought me out, if that makes any sense. When you buy enough of this stuff, it works. I think over my shoulder, I think somewhere over there, you'll see that I have the Stones mono set, which I bought for a reasonable amount of money. It's now ungodly amount. I have the other Rolling Stones set, which is the stereo one. I bought that. That's actually probably the first albums in that era, the sort of early 70s, the Exile stuff and on stuff, are probably my go-to Stones records. Those are Half Speed, Miles Showell. Clearly went through a digital process in order to make that happen. The Abbey Road stuff, they sound great. Do they sound better than the first pressing, I guess is a French that I have of Exile? Sound different. My French pressing is certainly less clean than that one, but nonetheless, that's a lot of fun. The Stones in mono, it's a very good set, but I listen to it relatively seldomly. I bought it not necessarily just as a collector, but as something that I thought I should have to have these records, just like I have all the Super Audio CDs. Speaking of DSD, all the Super Audio CDs of the Rolling Stones records right from the beginning. So I have very excellent digital versions, or digital vinyl versions. They don't sound alike. They sound similar, but very different, of the Rolling Stones. So what do we get with this? Well, anybody that has anything, any knowledge of the Rolling Stones catalog knows that there are fundamental differences in release between the US and UK, US and Canada, obviously. But the US release has included different tracks, different layouts. There's two versions of Aftermath, one with a hyphen, one without. And so when MoFi did this, the Beatles were the same way, and the Beatles catalog sort of solidified around the UK records with a couple of things, past masters and stuff like that. That's how they got around that. And it's a whole nother conversation about the MoFi Beatles set. But the Rolling Stones, what they did, they actually got the master tapes, either US or UK, and properly mastered them in a way that is very, very satisfying. Now, the mastering choices, again, aren't to absolutely everyone's taste. I understand that. But for some of these records, they weren't the most amazing audiophile recordings to begin with. You just want to make sure you're getting the most out of it and the playback as clean as possible. And I have to say, I have hundreds of MoFi releases. Well, at least well over 100. And this is astonishing, the quality of vinyl, the actual records themselves. So on that level alone, spoiler, I'm absolutely ecstatic. But let's dive in and actually show you what you get. So first of all, you get this crazy box. So there's 5,000 of these, if I believe correctly. It opens with this little sort of brass flap. You unlock it and it opens up, and inside you have a series of records, a book, and a list of all the albums that are included here. And if I just angle over here, so you have the Rolling Stones self-titled, 12x5, Out of Our Heads, Aftermath. Now it's listed here without a hyphen. Between the Buttons, Their Satanic Majesty's Requests, Beggar's Banquet, Let It Bleed, Get Your Yayas Out, and then Hot Rocks Volume 1 and 2. Gotta say, Hot Rocks was actually the first Rolling Stone CD I ever bought, back when I was just sort of getting into it. It's like the singles were what I wanted to be. And there's a bunch of stuff on Hot Rocks, not on any of these records, so very much this sort of fulfills, there's some duplication, but it fulfills what you kind of want, is to have some stuff on Hot Rocks that sort of carries over that way. Inside here, I'll show, sort of on the corner, the first thing you get, because of course you do, is one of these. And I kind of only ever heard of these. This is a geodisc. This was included in a bunch of their box sets. The Sinatra set, I think, had it. Definitely the Beatles set had it. And what it is it's a calibration tool. Because like anybody crazy enough to buy this box set, especially at the time, I guess it was a couple $100 Canadian in 1982-ish. Yeah, you know, fortune then, not insignificant now, with inflation. But nonetheless, geodisc is an alignment tool. It's a big plastic chunky thing that you put on your turntable to make sure it all behaves. If you actually look at it, there you go. Piece of plastic, has grooves. Now, just for giggles, I put it on my turntable, dropped my cartridge on it to see that it actually lined up, and it did, because, you know, I have my stuff professionally done. But nonetheless, it's, I guess, a fun thing to have. I don't know that I'll ever use it. It definitely occupies some space, but it's pretty amusing that it's here in the set, because why not? Now, what's also in this box, as I'm opening it up carefully, is the booklet. Now, I would have loved if the booklet sort of had been hardcover, so it actually slipped in a little bit more. But it's this weird sort of softcover thing. But it's, considering this actually dates back 40 years, it's in pretty decent shape, all things considered. When you open it up, one reason it's a little buckly is because you have the lenticulicious version of Satanic Majesty's Requests cover. I would dig in here. It's somewhere over my shoulder now. I don't think I can grab it on screen. I might be able to. I lied. Here is the box set, the recent box set with the same lenticular thing. And again, nice hardcover with sort of opening as an album. But that's the whole thing. You can see you have lots of versions of this kind of stuff. So the Rolling Stones have done recent releases, which are really quite lovely. But anyway, inside here, the vintage version, we have a list of their discography, but also here, sort of a breakdown. You can see on the bottom, an absolute breakdown of the actual production, the way that they actually capture the tapes, tell the entire story of getting the master tapes, getting everything together, etc., as this prologue. And then each record sort of breaks down this way, and this is how they're sort of replicating the original album art by showing the tracks, recording the Rolling Stones, all that. You can see, so you have front cover, and behind it you actually have what would have been on the back cover, right? There's Out of Our Heads. On the back of Out of Our Heads, on the other side, we have this, right? And so, not dissimilar to what MoFi does now in their box sets, that the actual, we'll get to what the actual covers look like, that they put as supplemental materials what the original covers look like. So as you go through, you can see pretty much replicating as we go all the way down to the end. And we're basically doing that, right? So I flipped over a couple pages, but you get the idea that other than the actual original verbiage, you basically have the artwork for the individual records. One of the things up here, the owner of Rotate, that we're on the phone with him, he's like, you know that smell that you sometimes have with really old records that you sort of open up and they have that? Yeah, this doesn't have any of that. Yeah, no cigarette smell, no nothing weird. It was a pretty immaculate set. Now, what's pretty fascinating for me, if I can get this in without further dinging this booklet, it's a little bit of a pain, is I can show you one of these sleeves and know they're all pretty much the same. The only way to actually delineate is on the spine of what it is. But other than that, it is Rolling Stones on the front, nothing on back, and then on the spine it actually says what it has, and on the end it says, of course, original master recordings. And so you have that for all the records. They're all that, just with a little bit of writing here on the spine to show what it is, which is, let's just say, a choice. It would have been nice, you know, for them to at least have a little box, something here, gold embossed, something like what they do with the one steps, but nonetheless, very plain case. Now, back in the day, their trademark way of putting the records in slide sleeves to protect them, that's what we have here. You have, again, Rolling Stones, once again, a generic thing, the ABCO and all the details, OMR, and inside this, you actually had a sleeve. Now, this is the original sleeve it came in. It wasn't a branded, but it was still that same rice paper sleeve that we sort of associate with MoFi. And on the corner here, on the top here, is actually some handwriting. I don't know how well it's probably going to be impossible to see. But what that says is April 11th, 1985. And there used to be this fell off this one, a little sticker that said Last. Now, if I understand correctly, Last was a used record store in England. And so what's entirely possible is that this was bought in, let's say, very early 80s, and then resold in 1985, and essentially, I believe, unplayed. For the most part. There is absolutely no spindle marks, no fingerprints, nothing. I've put this in a Vinyl Storage Solutions 3mm sleeve, which is now my go-to for archiving. But the records themselves are just immaculate. Now, I know camera's not going to show this up, but this is a 40-year-old record, and it looks better, cleaner, just absolutely mint, in a way that stuff that I buy this week, that came out this week from a brand new release. It's just absolutely ridiculous how beautiful these records. There's a couple very superficial surface marks if you look very, very close. Just normal pressing artifacts, nothing that cuts in, nothing that's actually underneath the grain. But the actual vinyl itself, when you actually look at the grooves, just immaculate. Absolutely immaculate, and it plays the same. A lot of, especially the later records, have moments of incredible dynamics. You have these explosions of drums, but you also have these quiet moments. You have choir moments and stuff like you can't always get what you want. But when things get down, think about the dynamics of the song. You have the massive choir, then cut to the acoustic guitar, then cut to the French horn, that just mix singing, and then the band comes in. All these fluctuations. And inevitably, even you have pops and clicks or just general surface noise. That's the stuff that really sort of gets on your nerves when you listen to vinyl. You just want to lose yourself and not lose yourself in the actual artifacts of the reproduction. This truly does that. So this was the original self-titled. I've given this a listen. It's a bit trebly, I gotta say, but the original record is very much of that ilk. Really, really bright. That's essentially the way it was recorded, and I'm certainly getting a lot of that out of this release. I then cheated. I dove into my two favorite records from the set, just for the purpose of this video. I listened to all of Let It Bleed and all of Beggar's Banquet. And again, back to Can't Always Get What You Want. That's my go-to testing song. I have a couple songs that whenever I buy new records, that was one I would throw on. First of all, I know the song very, very well. But second of all, it's the timbre, the sound of the French horn. It's very close to human voice in terms of its harmonic range, but it has a lushness and a fullness, and it hits, for me, right at that sort of mid range spot where you're going to get into what the crossover the speaker is doing, the construction of the sort of mid-range drivers, and where that it'll either sound too high or too low, too bassy, too trebly, depending on how the actual speaker's voice. And if you get a really decent set of speakers, like I'm blessed to have, you get something that just sounds like a French horn. And so I've listened. I have the Blu-ray audio. I have the clear version of the most recent digital release. I obviously have the mono version, the mono set. This version kills them all. This is an incredibly good version for me of Let It Bleed, and specifically Can You Always Get What You Want. I'm hearing stuff. I mean, I always put that on for friends. I've played it a lot of times for guests, and you actually hear stuff in that song you've never heard before. I'm hearing more stuff from this particular pressing. It's quite extraordinary. Let's be clear, it is not because this is digital, not digital, and this one's analog. This is a hell of a lot closer to the age the analog tapes were originally released. The vinyl itself is exquisite, the actual pressing is exquisite, and the care and attention that Mobile Fidelity brought to the mastering of this is absolutely in keeping. And so for me, it has much more to do with that than anything else, but all of these are factors, of course. So yeah, in terms of like what you're actually to expect, again, 40-year record, wasn't taken in and out very much. There's a little bit of a mark. You can see some white cardboard sort of at the tip there. They all have that. I did try putting them into sleeves, and the box construction is such that it simply will not close properly, and I didn't want to force it. And really, it's already got probably as much damage as it's going to get, as long as I'm sort of reasonable with the records. When it's sealed up, it sort of does its thing. You can see there's, on the top, there's a little bit of a gouge. I don't care. The box itself closes. There's no weird mold on it. There's a, if I lift it up without breaking anything, there's a brass plaque. The bottom is actually felt, which is really interesting, so it doesn't slide. I don't want to lift it all the way up to show it. But mine is number, for those counting, 2,702. So if you ever owned 2,702, now it's mine. You're welcome to come visit it. Here. Anyway, yeah, let's try to do this. So you can see this bottom is a little felt, and even that is in reasonably good shape, all things considered. So, is this set worth the crazy exorbitant price? Well, no, nothing ever is, but is it worth it to me? Yeah, because obviously I paid for it. This was something that I considered a birthday present. I have lots of things I consider birthday presents, but you know, let's consider this one of the big ones for this year, which was for me a pretty big birthday. I think a couple interesting things. First of all, we're never going to get this again. There is no, I don't think there's going to be another proper reproduction from the tapes ever again like this was done. Everything, especially in that era, has been captured in high-resolution digital. I think that's what the Stones are going to be working from. So just to simply have, for me, a different version, a different iteration for this is not the end of the world. Is the newer version that the studio has done themselves, or at least APCO has done for themselves, better than this? No, this, for me, is a little bit better. Probably on a track-by-track, album-by-album basis. As I dig in, I'll find differences, etc. Because of all the craziness with MoFi this week, I think there will actually be a little bit of a run on the analog stuff. The people who are like would have been spending money on new MoFi stuff will be looking for either first pressings or actually older archival stuff when MoFi was still doing its analog thing. And so in a funny way, I think this will actually accrue. May they live to 120, but Mick and Keith are not going to be around forever. We lost Charlie not that long ago. So I think that the Rolling Stones themselves will continue to have value to younger generations who are actually looking for sort of the best of the best. And the fact that this is 1 of 5,000 truly makes it a very special item indeed, a very unique thing in terms of collectability. The Beatles one, again, Beatles collectors are another level of crazy, and people have it just to have another Beatles version. I have the stereo, I have the mono, I have the blue box, and for me that's more than sufficient unless somebody wants to gift me their MoFi. I'm not going to chase it down for it. It's basically twice as much as this one runs. But for the records that I listen to, the way that I listen to Rolling Stones, this for me is absolutely something that will become a prime core of my Rolling Stones collection. Simple as that. And to have the chance to have it for a not insignificant fund, but not insignificant amount of money, but certainly less than it's going for, less than I could sell it for, frankly, and helping out somebody who sold it on commission, but also helping out a retailer that actually care to stay in business because they've been very good to me in the past. I think this is something that I'm going to treasure for many years to come. I would love if this was some sponsored post, but no, I paid for this thing, and sort of got to experience not only sort of the old school version of this type of record, but also the old school thing of what people dream of with record stores, that you actually have record store owners that sort of know what you're looking for and reach out to you. I know it seems like a small thing, but it's something, yeah, the Amazons of this world will actually do you might be interested in this and send you an email, but there's something very specific when there's a human connection that you know that I know who I bought this from, they know who supplied it to them, that there's a continuation of story about this actual, for lack of a better word, artifact that sort of adds to the ritualistic nature of vinyl playback that people who are into this sort of thing really love. If I just wanted it, I could just listen to stuff and streaming, but there's something to be said about listening, actually engaging this playback and enjoying this box set. So there we go. Happy to address any questions in the comments. Really appreciate everybody that's been subscribing of late. We're trying really hard on this channel to give sort of a wide range look at not only obviously movie stuff that we primarily look at, but other stuff that we put on our shelves. We are called that shelf. Really happy to have the opportunity to add this to my collection. And I look forward to hearing from you guys, as I said in the comments. For thatshelf.com, I'm Jason Gorber. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe. It really does help us a lot. Like, do all the stuff. Follow us on social media, and spread the word. We'd really love to reach more and more people about the sort of more the ridiculous insanity of this, but also to discuss it in a sort of calm and much more open way. Really appreciate everything you guys can do to help facilitate that. We will see you next video. All the best. Take care.